So things haven't exactly been working out for Disney. They haven't been doing very well at the box office, and now there's rumors that the company is going to be sold, and they can't really blame anyone but themselves. Disney has been buying up a lot of other companies to the point where it feels like they kind of have a monopoly on entertainment, but I also feel like they've been mismanaging things a lot. Many of these properties that had previously been successful are now floundering under Disney, and watching Disney fumble the bag this hard is just sad. They've been cranking out a lot of content to the point where even their CEO admitted that it was doing more harm than good, and it got to a point where they were definitely focusing more on quantity over quality, and flooding Disney Plus with this kind of content hasn't been good for the service. They've been bleeding subscribers, and I can't fault them for leaving. I mean, Secret Invasion was just awful, and it's so sad to see the MCU devolve to this point. Endgame was an experience years in the making, and in my opinion it was totally worth the build-up, but the MCU has definitely fallen off since then. There are people who think Endgame would have been the perfect finale for the series, and I think that's pretty understandable, but I think if they had the proper direction and focus, it could have kept going strong. They end up juggling a lot of plot points that in my opinion were not fleshed out as well as they needed to be. There's the fallout from the snap and the 5-year time skip, the multiverse, the Skrull invasion. It's all pretty messy and not handled well. A lot of people talk about superhero fatigue, but I feel like that's more the studio's fault than actual superhero stories. Films like Guardians of the Galaxy 3, Across the Spider-Verse, and Miraculous Ladybug were all successful, despite being superhero properties. I think the main problem is that they pushed out so much content of subpar quality, and it's also disappointing to see these characters that you've grown so fond of end up being treated really poorly. They gave Nick Fury the same sad and downtrodden story as they did with Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Indiana Jones, which are also Disney-owned properties. Needless to say, there seems to be a pattern here, having these old established heroes be sad and broken in their old age. Like I said in a previous video, do they know you can grow old and be happy and surrounded by loved ones? It also seems like they'll do things without concern for continuity. I realize the MCU has been going on for quite a while, and there's going to be continuity errors, but, and this is a spoiler so you might want to skip ahead for this part, I'll leave a timestamp, making Rhodey a Skrull in disguise? And apparently he's been that way since Civil War? Really? Why would they do that? It's like they were just going for shock value, which in my opinion is just not the best way to handle storytelling. When the MCU started, we were only getting a few movies over the course of a few years, and they were generally character driven, with emphasis on how these characters developed throughout their stories, and throughout the MCU in general, but now they're just throwing so much at our screens, and they themselves can't even keep up. Like how the people who wrote Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness admitted that they wrote it without actually finishing WandaVision, which was directly leading into Multiverse of Madness. So it's not that surprising that things are feeling disjointed and messy. Hopefully Disney will course correct, but at this point I'm not sure if the MCU can recapture its former glory. I am glad that the CEO Bob Iger has decided to slow down on these projects. I do think it would benefit them to maybe go back to the drawing board and really streamline the MCU before going forward. I also think they get a little hung up on which characters can show up where. Like they were initially planning on having Doctor Strange show up in WandaVision, which I think would have made a lot of sense, but they decided against it because they didn't want Doctor Strange overshadowing her, I guess. Kevin Feige said, "We didn't want the end of the show to be commoditized to go to the next movie. Here's the white guy, let me show you how power works." I think he's having a limited mindset when it comes to this situation. They're both magic users, so it makes a lot of sense for them to come together, like they did with Mom. But they could have had it so the writers can still have him cameo without him actually showing her up in her own show. It sounds like Kevin Feige just doesn't believe in the writers. Now there's a writers and an actors strike going on in Hollywood, which is threatening some of Disney's latest projects, including their live action movies that they're so fond of. These include things like Lilo and Stitch and The Hunchback of Notre Dame, although they still have quite a lot planned, including remakes of films like Moana and Tangled, which are very recent. Moana's not even a decade old. At this point, I'm surprised they're not rebooting the MCU. Right now, their latest remake in the works is Snow White. Snow White was the company's very first animated feature film, and it's really important to Disney's history. I don't think Disney would really be a thing without it. There were a lot of naysayers, but Walt Disney was able to prove everyone wrong, and even won Oscars for the film. But unfortunately, the way the current brand talks about this movie, it kind of feels like Disney hates it. In many interviews, the two leads, Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot, who are playing Snow White and the Evil Queen respectively, often talk about how the original is old and outdated, and he needs to be changed for modern audiences.
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. And so it's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere to see themselves in.
And they're changing the meaning of Fairest of Them All. Where the original was talking about beauty, this one is now talking about how just the ruler is.
The cartoon was made 85 years ago, and therefore it's extremely dated when it comes to the ideas of women being in roles of power and what a woman is fit for in the world. And so when we came to reimagining the actual role of Snow White, it became about the fairest of them all, meaning who is the most just and who can become a fantastic leader. And the reality is, Snow White has to learn a lot of lessons about coming into her own power before she can come into power over a kingdom.
Also, the fact that she's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's the proactive one, and she's the one who set the terms, is what makes it so relevant to where we are today.
The thing is, I don't think the evil queen cares about being just. She was known for her vanity, and she hardly seemed concerned about anyone else's well-being. She tries to have Snow White murdered, and there's a scene where she sees the skeleton of a prisoner who seems to have died while desperately trying to reach water. She mocks it and then destroys it. So, I think it's a little out of character for her to ask the mirror who's the most just of them all. Unless she's being sarcastic, but this seems silly, and I'm not really sure what they're talking about when they say that the original had backwards ideas about women. The evil queen is a single woman who is ruling unimpeded. She has absolute authority and even told someone to kill the princess, and he wasn't able to question her. And while Snow White was cleaning and cooking, she wasn't doing that because it was her responsibility as a woman. She thought if she cleaned up, they would let her stay with them, because she literally had nowhere else to go and her stepmom was trying to kill her.
I know. We'll clean the house and surprise them. Then maybe they'll let me stay.
And they did let her stay rent-free, so she was just cooking to be nice and earn her keep. They're totally misrepresenting the film, and I guess Disney's just okay with this because they're allowed to say this on press tours. On top of that, they've removed Prince Charming and replaced him with a character known as Jonathan, who's reportedly going to be more of a Robin Hood type character. Personally, I would prefer that they had expanded the prince's role instead of removing him entirely. Walt Disney did intend for the prince to have more of a role in the original film, but they found it difficult to animate a grown man, so they ended up scrapping a lot of his scenes, and later used that content for Prince Philip in Sleeping Beauty. But they could have just expanded on the prince, have them get together officially, and then have the original ending the way it was, since they were concerned about the prince waking up Snow White with a kiss. But they've been pretty obvious with how they feel about the original and its ending. They're also making major changes to not only the script, but to the story as well, where now instead of 7 dwarves, they are 7 magical creatures, seemingly because Peter Dinklage, a very prominent little person actor, complained about them, claiming that Snow White and the 7 dwarves was an insult and a backward story because the dwarves all lived together in a cave, except it sounds like he just hasn't seen the movie in a long time. The dwarves didn't live in a cave, they worked in a cave, they lived in a cottage. Other Little People actors have come out against Disney for changing the dwarves to magical creatures because it takes away roles that little people could fill. Dinklage probably meant well, but I don't think Disney really thought this through. To be honest, I feel like if they feel this badly about Snow White, maybe they shouldn't remake it. Maybe they could have done something original that they were passionate about. It just feels like Disney is really obsessed with fixing their old movies right now. We've seen this with their previous live-action remakes. It feels like Disney has a self-loathing problem, and that's a shame. Disney as a company has done so much to build the animation industry, but it feels like instead of continuing to innovate, all they're doing is tearing down their old works. Why not keep building on the foundation they made? We're going to have to see what the future holds for the company. Admittedly, I'm not the most optimistic about it, especially about the rumors about them having to sell. It could be interesting the next few years, but that's my opinion. What do you guys think? Have you been liking the direction Disney's been going in? Or do you think they've made their bed and now they have to lie in it? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really appreciate it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to our members: Stutania, Tyrant Carnivore, Carnivore, Shiny Orc Boy, The Rabbit Mancer, General Bolivar, Depth Charge Media, Samaru163, Gabby Hime, Verdant Range, JVR, Hussyman42, Nixel, Phil C, Taylor Ramirez, Caleb Nelson, Dakari the Professor, Equestron, Norman Sweetcream, Way Beyond Coincidence, Garcia XV Legend, Hunter Rose, 80s Nostalgia Guy, Felix Spam, Soundboy00, Owen Wildish, Player Zero, Kitsune Fiora, Lucas Geist, Data Dine Executive, Jade Draws, Ninja Rex, Blue Spirit, Bandito Bane, Lil, Meowsers, Sky, Jinkays E, and Philip. Thank you all so much for your support. If you want to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this video, you can leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the content. And that part's free. We also have Buy Me Coffee if you want to support us that way. It's linked in the description. Thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.